We've started the webinar.
I think so. Looks like it has.
So
Okay.
who's talking first?
Hello. Welcome to the Route 29 North Corridor Study virtual public meeting. I'm Charles Proctor, the VDOT Culpeper District Planning Manager. The study team consists of staff from the TJPDC, VDOT, and the consultant team from Kittleson. We're reviewing the corridor for potential multimodal improvements. We have received several concerns related to the 29 Fraze Mill intersection. This location was previously studied and submitted for Smart Scale. Funded by the TJPDC, or Smart Scale funded, was submitted by the TJPDC at the request of Albemarle County. It is currently not one of the county's recommended applications for next round of Smart Scale. The intersection will be evaluated as part of this study for potential improvements. We are in the initial stages of the study and want to hear your comments and concerns with travel on the corridor. We appreciate your participation in this meeting and the survey. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lucinda Shannon with the TJPDC.
Thank you, Chuck. And thanks everyone for joining us as we plan for the future of our transportation systems in North Albemarle and Greene counties. The Route 29 corridor is a main artery into the heart of the Charlottesville region. This study wants to ensure smooth travels for the present and future. This includes travel by all modes: private vehicles, public transport, pedestrians, and cyclists. I'm Lucinda Shannon, and I'm the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission staff person working with VDOT on this study. The Planning District Commission coordinates regional planning with the City of Charlottesville, Albemarle, Greene, Louisa, Fluvanna, and Nelson counties. And now I will turn it over to, not sure who.
You're going to turn it over to me, Lucinda. This is Chris Teasler. Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Teasler, a principal engineer with Kittleson and Associates. Also happy to have Andy Butzik and Kylie Cavanis this evening, who will be presenting some materials to you as well. But we're very excited to be supporting VDOT and TJPDC in this study effort. And beyond the immediate project team, again, Lucinda mentioned several of them, but wanted just to point out who our key stakeholders and partners are in this study. So again, VDOT and TJPDC, of course, but the County of Albemarle, Greene County, Charlottesville Area Transit, and Jaunt, our transit partners. Really a nice holistic and robust multimodal team of transportation planners, engineers, and professionals to look at this corridor in particular with respect to mobility and safety over the next 20 years. Hopefully anticipate the ever increasing growth along the corridor and how best to adapt and solve some of the challenges that we have out there. So really the goal for this evening's meeting is really to help enhance your understanding of the current conditions along the corridor with respect to mobility and safety. So we're going to review some of those materials with you. Kylie and Andy will introduce those, some of the future no build conditions, and that's really the conditions, and we look out to our horizon year of 2040. You know, if nothing were to change except realizing the growth and increased travel demand and pressures on the corridor, what would happen if nothing happens? Because that becomes our baseline upon which to measure and assess different alternatives and potential solutions and improvements. And lastly, we want to share what we believe the vision of this project is and the goals and objectives that underpin it. The goals and objectives in this vision were developed by the project team and the stakeholders, but they're still in draft form. I think that's an important point to make. And part of the reason we want to share those with you is to get your feedback, to make sure that our goals aren't missing, missing the mark. We're not missing anything, and we can take a look at those. So just from a real high level perspective, we'll dive into this more, but the corridor itself that we're studying is just over 6 miles long from basically Airport Road at the south end, north into Greene County, and just past Matthews Mill Road, including the Deerfield Drive intersection given the commercial activity in that location and a connected intersection that kind of relates to that traffic signal. Certainly, this arterial was already mentioned is a pretty critical one within the region. It's one of 3 national highway system routes in the region, the other 2 being US 33 and I-64. And we know that along this corridor, there are several planned developments and anticipated increasing population growth. And that equates to more demand and pressure put on this corridor to serve its mobility function for the region. And so I think we can go to the next slide. Really, this project is intended to be multimodal, right? It's not just about moving the cars on US 29. It's really thinking about moving people through this corridor, whether that be by transit, by bike, walking, and of course, vehicles as well. We're going to assess those future travel projections and development patterns and really understand in the future what that baseline condition is and what we need to solve and what we need to look at more closely. Once we have that understanding, we will generate a range of solutions, improvements, and enhancements to address the study goals and objectives. And again, we'll share those with you in detail here shortly. Again, really focused on several key elements: mobility, safety, economic development, you name it. And ultimately, we're going to test the application and the relevance of those solutions, bring those back to you, in draft form, again, just like this, to gain and gather your input and feedback. You are the users of this facility on a day in, day out basis. You know the corridor and the region better than most. And so your feedback is really valuable to the project team to help identify the proper and best solutions that meet the mobility and safety needs of the corridor, but also the community. And with that, I will turn it over to, I believe, Andy, who's going to start us talking us through, or is it Kylie? I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's Kylie.
It's Kylie. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Kylie Cavanis with Kittleson, and I will be sharing corridor conditions with you all tonight. So by nature, US 29, like Chris said, is a major arterial, which tends to traditionally go hand in hand with heavy vehicular traffic. Other modes of transportation are much less supported, as you can see in just a snippet of a map showing facilities. Throughout the extent of the study area, there is a lack of bicycle and pedestrian facilities like trails, shared use paths, and crossings. Airport Road is the only intersection at US 29 with bike and ped facilities along our study corridor. And even at that, they only exist on 2 of the 4 approaches. So you're seeing that large disconnect for bike ped users in the area traveling north of Charlottesville down to the city. Similarly, there is a lack of existing transit facilities on the corridor. So 2 transit services run in the vicinity of the study area, both of which are stakeholders of ours on this study: Charlottesville Area Transit, or CAT, and Jaunt. And so Jaunt runs a connect line for commuters into Charlottesville, and its closest transit stop to the study area is about 900 feet south of Airport Road. So technically out of study limits, but in the Hollymead Town Center by the Food Lion, while CAT's closest stop is 3 miles south of Airport Road at the Walmart off of US 29. Now, shifting gears a little bit into crashes along the corridor, we pulled crash data from 2015 to 2020 to get a sense of existing safety conditions. There were 798 crashes along the corridor in that time within our limits. 33% of those reported injuries or fatalities. The 3 fatal crashes all involved pedestrians between Deerfield Drive and Heatherton Drive to the north in Greene County. And rear end crashes are the most common type pulled from the data at 61%, followed by angle crashes and off-road fixed object crashes. So you can see from this graphic, most occurred at intersections, about 61%, whereas the remaining 39% occurred throughout the corridor, not, I guess, outside of 250 feet of an intersection. So now I want to get into traffic operations, which analyzes essentially how a roadway is functioning. This graphic is helpful to understand the term level of service, which we will be referring to in the upcoming slides and in the public materials that you can also access on the project website. Essentially, level of service, otherwise called LOS, is a metric used to determine the quality, essentially, of an intersection. It is based on a scale of A through F, where A is best. It's the ideal free flow conditions. You're all smiles, living the dream. And F is poor, significantly delayed conditions, very stressful. And so in urban conditions, we aim for a level of service D or better as engineers. Taking a look at the AM period, there is a heavy southbound through traffic along the corridor, as I'm sure you all know, during the intersection peak hours, which makes sense given the morning rush for commuters into the city of Charlottesville. This graphic, along with the ones on the following slides that I'll show, have bubbles for the different types of level of service. So your green bubble is level of service D or better. Level of service E is a yellow bubble, and level of service F is the red bubble. Additionally, 2 intersections are over capacity in the existing conditions today in the morning period, and those intersections are Fraze Mill Road and Airport Road at US 29. Shifting into the PM now, we see a less strained corridor with overall less capacity and level of service issues. But you see that directional shift of, instead of southbound traffic towards Charlottesville in the morning, you're now seeing them leaving Charlottesville headed northbound in the evening. And so additional, let's see, 2 intersections operate at worse than a level of service D, and Airport Road is the only intersection in this case that ends up being over capacity, or where the volume just exceeds the capacity that's actually able to be processed. And before I get into future no build conditions, which we did take a look at for year 2045, we have to consider what planned improvements are moving forward or proposed along the study corridor. And so the largest roadway improvement is the Route 670 connector, which is anticipated to be a 2-lane road connecting Route 670 to US 29 by the year 2025. And in addition to that, 3 new signals are also planned and tied directly to site development in the areas of Heatherton Drive and the North Side Drive ARCUT that's existing today. In our no build conditions, year 2045, we assumed that year and analyzed the corridor, assuming these improvements on the slide. All other intersections we are assuming to be as they are existing conditions out there today. So in the future no build traffic conditions, a growth rate was applied to volumes based on the statewide planning system, historic growth graphs. And we see the morning has a number of intersections operating at level of service E and F now, with 5 intersections over capacity given the growth, which is 3 more than what we saw in the existing conditions for the morning. And now in the PM future no build conditions, what we see is more intersections, again, operating at level of service E or F than previously with existing conditions. And additionally, 6 intersections are over capacity as opposed to only Airport Road in the existing conditions being over capacity in the PM. So this is the work that we have done so far. I provided you with all of the corridor conditions, existing and anticipated, that we know of right now and conditions of US 29 within our study area. So now I'll pass it off to Andy Butzik to present goals and objectives for the study.
Thanks, Kylie. Yeah, this is Andy Butzik, also with Kittleson. And as Kylie highlighted, under the 2045 no build condition, or the do nothing condition, we're expecting some operational and safety challenges along the corridor. But luckily, you have some great local agencies who are being proactive in their planning and looking to make improvements along this corridor in the meantime, so that those hopefully never come to fruition. So the ultimate vision for this corridor is that it's a corridor that provides safe travel and adequate capacity for all uses and users of the roadway. That's sort of a feel-good statement. So it's kind of hard to fathom that. That's like high level. What does that mean? So in terms of the actual study that we're doing here, we've developed a draft set of goals with the project team and the stakeholders, and we'll walk through those on the next couple of slides. So, and as Chris mentioned at the beginning, these are just draft goals. We'll be looking to get your feedback and a survey that, again, Chris will highlight in a few minutes. So the first goal is to improve safety, and this can be accomplished in a number of ways. The first is to reduce or manage the number of vehicular conflict points. So if vehicles never cross paths, there's less likelihood that they'll actually crash. Or if they crash, if they are going to crash, if they crash at an angle that's not perpendicular, just reducing that severity of those crashes can go a long ways in terms of improving safety. Another way is to provide pedestrian crossings and opportunities along the commercial areas. As Kai highlighted, there were 3 fatal pedestrian crashes up on the north end of the corridor, but there's the potential without the pedestrian crossings there throughout the corridor that those could reoccur or pop up in new locations. So providing that opportunity for pedestrians to cross in a designated area and a quote-unquote safer area is one of our key goals. So accomplishing that, and then providing that separation between vehicles and the bike ped modes. As you know, driving along this corridor, it's posted at 45, 55 miles an hour. There are a lot of people speeding out there. You have a lot of heavy truck traffic. So it's not exactly comfortable for all users, for all bike peds to ride along the shoulder or walk along the grass. So providing that separation is key to improving safety. The second goal is to manage congestion. And one key objective in this goal is to increase the person throughput capacity, and highlighting person throughput, not necessarily single occupant vehicles. While again, Chris mentioned we will be looking at ways to improve vehicular travel through this corridor, creating that throughput, whether it's through transit, which is a bit more efficient in terms of getting folks through the corridor, or creating a mode shift so that not everyone's a single occupant vehicle, that there's folks who may want to bike or walk along the corridor, so they're not in a vehicle. It can also be managed by improving intersections. So these could be anywhere from adding capacity through additional turn lanes, or looking at alternative control forms for intersections, such as a roundabout. Just taking a holistic look along the corridor to see what's out there today and what potential improvements could be. Reducing travel time variability. As you may experience, if you're traveling to work, it takes you 20 minutes one day and then 50 minutes the next day. It's not really a great thing. You're never quite sure when to leave for work. You don't want to show up for work 30 minutes early. So that's a key metric in terms of managing congestion. And that variability can come from a number of things, from work zones, inclement weather, special events such as basketball games, football games at UVA, or a crash. So just better managing that reliability for users along the corridor. And again, making an efficient use of right-of-way for all users. That's sort of a common theme that you'll see throughout all of these goals. Okay, the third goal is to increase multimodal usability and accessibility. Again, this is related to some of the other goals, but providing bicycle facilities that connect to nearby parks and other amenities. So not just for recreational users, but also for users who want to potentially bike to work, bike to the store, just providing those opportunities that aren't there today. Providing ADA accessible transit stops, creating bus shelters, bus pads where someone who is in a wheelchair could easily access a bus, providing those that sort of relatively low cost improvements, but they can make a huge difference in terms of the quality of life for folks who are traveling on the corridor. And then again, providing that safe pedestrian crossing at target intersections where there are none today. Fourth goal is to support future growth. So recognizing that there are external factors, there is going to be growth in volumes along this corridor. So to help support that growth and make sure that the corridor can accommodate that, we can develop access management strategies, whether that's restricting driveway movements so that new developments that come in don't have necessarily 5 driveways on US 29, or making sure that there's turn lanes where necessary, just creating that there's strategies now. So as new developments come in, we're being thoughtful about that. Supporting local traffic as well as regional traffic, because we do have both of those along that corridor, and it's important to keep that context. And then again, providing transit services that provides another mode choice other than just single occupant vehicle. And the last draft goal is supporting economic development. And this is an important one, recognizing that this area is going to grow and we want it to grow in a responsible manner. You don't just want all these new businesses coming in without much planning. So, making sure that we're accommodating the existing truck traffic, that is a key thing for the economy in this area, providing mode choice so that not everyone necessarily who doesn't want to drive to work has to drive to work, providing that opportunity for folks to walk or bike or take transit to key areas, and beautifying the corridor so that it is a desirable area for folks to come and stay and play and live.
Thanks, Andy, for that overview. So, again, the project team and the stakeholders have drafted these goals and identified some key objectives that help us measure both quantitatively and qualitatively how well different solutions or opportunities or improvements that we may identify through this study actually meet those intended goals to drive the outcome. And really, we want to hear from you on those things. So as you think about this, and really, I'll talk a little bit about it more here in a moment with the online survey, but we're obviously here as well. We can have some discussion, but things like, what do you think should be included, or did we miss something? What are your transportation priorities? We'd like to hear your thoughts on that. What else should we be considering for this study? If you feel like something's missing, we want to hear about that, or things that you think, great, I'm glad you're looking at that. We take positive and constructive feedback alike. So that's really what we hope to hear from you, and leverage this discussion and then the survey and other interactions we'll be having throughout the study for that purpose. So, as I stated, you can go to the next slide. As I stated at the beginning, community input and your participation is really at the heart of this study. Issues and solutions that the project team may develop in a vacuum won't be nearly as successful as those we develop with your input and feedback. And there's going to be a lot of different ways to do that. So we're having this first public meeting, and I'll talk about the survey again in a second. I keep teasing you with the survey, I apologize. But really, there's an opportunity always for community engagement through our study website, where as we work through this study, we're regularly updating the website with new project documents that are documenting where we are in the study and what we're finding. The survey is going to be open through the end of this month, so lots of opportunity and time to, at your leisure, visit the website, take a quick look at that. There's lots of different ways to provide good feedback, comments, and we really appreciate those. And then as we move along through the study, we eventually get to develop some potential alternatives or improvements. Again, we're not going to identify those and just pick them and be done. We're going to bring a suite of alternatives and improvements and potential opportunities back to you through a second public meeting, again, for your input. And we will have a second online survey related to those materials to make sure we can capture that feedback, and we have that opportunity to interact live here or virtually, or perhaps in person, who knows, in the future. So let's talk a little bit about that survey. So we use MetroQuest. So on the left, you see a picture of the VDOT project website. Kylie, I believe, has dropped a link for that in the chat, as well as what you see here on the right, which is really just a graphical representation of the MetroQuest survey that will walk you through that survey. It will talk you through these project goals and objectives, some of the materials, gather some basic info about you, just so you know where you live in Albemarle County or Greene County, things like that. And it really is going to provide a robust set of opportunities to share your feedback, comments, concerns, congestions, you name it. So as we think about the overall schedule, as Chuck said right up the front, we're really just in the early stages of this project. Right now, we've really just completed the future no build conditions and drafted these goals and objectives to bring to you. With that, we're going to start to look at, potential alternatives and solutions and improvements that start addressing the identified issues. But we really want to take your feedback now and through the month of September as we do that, so that informs that alternative development, so that when we come back to you in the wintertime and present those back to you early in 2022, I think we'll be hitting the mark pretty well. If you provide us good feedback, we can incorporate that feedback into alternatives and improvements. With a goal of wrapping this entire project up, taking that feedback, refining alternatives, completing the final report for the project in the spring of 2022. So that's our overall schedule. And lastly, just we'll think about the next steps. So again, please visit, share, push out to your friends, family, whoever might be interested. The website, which is here and again in the chat. Again, we'd really appreciate you taking some time to fill out and participate in the online survey. Again, that's going to be open for the remainder of this month. It'll close on after Friday, October 1st. So really actually into October. So lots of time to do that. And we appreciate you participating in it. We will have another public meeting again in early 2022. So be on the lookout. That'll be advertised much like this one was. That'll be on the website. You'll see it probably show up in social media. And it'll be easy to find. And we look forward to having you back with us then. And again, there are some documents on the website, I think, our existing conditions memo right now is there. But we'll continue to update and periodically upload those documents as they become completed and finalized. So there's going to be lots of different ways to stay connected and engaged with this project. And I think with that, we're going to finish the presentation portion. I myself would like to thank you all very much for taking some time out of your evening this evening to listen to this presentation. And I'm sure I'll speak for the stakeholders. Maybe they want to speak for themselves, but I know that they really appreciate your participation as well. I know that we've been receiving some questions in the chat in the Q&A function. So at this point, I think what we'll do is kind of pivot to that and try to walk through and address some of those. And if anybody is joined by phone and doesn't have access to what you're seeing here, and you have a question on your phone, if you need to raise your hand, to indicate that you have a question, you can push *9 on your phone to do that. And *6 will unmute you and mute you. We just ask that not everybody try to talk over one another. If we get a couple more voices, it gets really cluttered. So just please be respectful, and we'll hear all these out and work through all these questions. And Andy, am I turning it over to you maybe to moderate just kind of talk through the questions as we go?
Sure. Yeah, I'll walk through the Q&A questions first, and if we have folks raise their hand, I can jump into those. I think ultimately, if we can stay here as long as we need, but if it gets to a point where we have so many questions, we can just please pop them in the chat, and we'll be sure that we respond to those in writing and post those on the project website so that we make sure we're answering everyone's questions. But I'll start with Q&A. So Stephen asks, does your team have the ability to put the various conditions, solutions, and traffic levels into a simulation program and run and rerun models to measure the different parameters evaluated?
Yeah, sure. I can take a stab. So the short answer to that question is yes. I mean, we're going to be using a variety of modeling softwares to model the the traffic operational performance of the corridor and the intersections. There's different levels of simulation. So we'll typically be doing that in programs like Synchro or perhaps Sim Traffic, which is a micro simulation program. Those models, especially the Sim Traffic micro simulation versions, do allow us to run multiple runs of the model and kind of vary some random variables to take a look at several iterations, so that we're making sure we're getting some consensus on the outcomes that the model is reporting. So the short answer is yes, and hopefully that answered that question.
Thanks. So John asks, Purdy Creek Park is a horse park. I own the adjacent property. At least a dozen trailers leave the park daily. Are you really proposing to send them north into active traffic and then make a U-turn at the next intersection? So, okay. I can
answer that if you want. When we did the previous study for the Fraze Mill intersection, we were proposing an R-cut as a recommendation from that study, and it was something that we came up with for a recommendation. The county did submit that for funding. It was not funded. As part of this study, we are going to reevaluate that intersection to see if there's what alternatives would work there to both address the safety issues that we're currently having at that intersection, as well as the operation issues, which we're seeing from the existing conditions report. So hopefully we'll come up with some other alternatives or consensus on this alternative when we have our follow-up meeting in January.
Great. Thanks, Chuck. So Andre asks, where will the new high school be built? That may be a question for one of the counties.
This is Kevin McDermott with Albemarle County. Assuming that this question is referring to a high school in Albemarle County and not in Greene, we do not have any site that we've identified for a high school at this time. There is currently a study that is looking at how we can potentially address high school or school needs in the county. But we haven't had any conclusions yet.
As far as Greene County, our midterm and long-term plan do not have a new high school.
Okay. Thank you both. John asks, is there a plan to add a half-mile shoulder at the next intersection north to accommodate the 90% of cars in the morning that are heading into Charlottesville? I'm not sure exactly which intersection that's referring to, but.
Yeah, if I was going to guess, it's probably related to Fraze Mill again. Andy, this is Chris. Again, I don't know that we would look at adding shoulder, but capacity improvements like adding lanes is always potentially on the table. As you can imagine, widening Route 29 or widening any highway type facility such as US 29 has lots of challenges, least of which is probably cost and right of way. But if there is a demonstrated need for additional capacity, we'll certainly consider something like that if it can improve operations. You have to balance that against other considerations along the corridor and the impacts to properties and communities, property owners along the corridor as well. So if that's appropriate, we'll certainly consider it.
Mark asks, will the survey be weighted based on the relationship of the respondents to the corridor?
Well, I can, this is Chris again. I can take a stab at that. I don't think we're planning to, I guess I'm trying to understand exactly what he means, the relationship of the respondents in terms of proximity to the corridor, or, you know, are they a business owner or a resident? I would say we're taking a very egalitarian and balanced, holistic approach to this. I think, you know, comments from anybody are valid and valued. There's really no weighting there's no math associated with that. It's just all feedback. Obviously, that gets interpreted and certainly consolidated into certain things, but that's what the survey actually will help us do. I mean, some of the survey questions will obviously give us some quantitative, you know, metrics in terms of, you know, percentage of respondents that feel one way versus another, but obviously there's also lots of opportunity to provide, you know, your own personal feedback and comments, or, you know, other, if that's an answer of several of the comments or questions, to expound on that.
Yeah, and this is Kylie Cavanis with Kittleson. I can just add one of the very first questions or sections of the survey that we have is about you and your relationship with Route 29. So again, not to say that there will be any quantitative or qualitative weighting or prioritization of, you know, one, you know, a commuter versus a resident versus anything else. But there are several questions that we ask about what your relationship is to the route, what destinations you use Route 29 for, and then how you get around. So those kinds of questions, along with the additional ones about priorities of what problems you're seeing, what opportunities you hope would be considered, all of that can be found in the survey.
Terry asks, I realize that the level of service is a ratio of volume to capacity. What is the time frame that is used to measure the volume and capacity?
Ooh, I'll answer that one too. I love a good technical question, so thanks, Terry. So level of service actually is a qualitative metric that's based on delay, average control delay experienced by a vehicle at an intersection, whereas volume to capacity is a ratio, and it expresses, you know, basically demand at the intersection relative to what the intersection's capacity is to process that demand. The time frame that's typically used within the industry is we look at 1 hour time periods, which is why you typically hear us say, you know, the PM peak hour or the AM peak hour. The analyses are really structured around a 1 hour time period. That evaluation can be made across any 1 hour time period, however. So, you know, you can certainly look at volume to capacity at off-peak hours, or really any 1 hour period. So it doesn't have to just be from 7 to 8 or 8:15 to 9:15. You could theoretically look at 7:05 to 8:05. We typically focus the 1 hour period down to about a 15-minute interval. So that's what you'll commonly see, but that is the time frame that's used.
Thanks, Chris. Next question. Are you going to include working on Route 29 up to and to include Route 33?
I will try to answer this question.
Go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, we had done a study previously to this for Greene County, and we hadn't looked at that corridor from basically from Matthews Mill all the way through 33. There's currently a study up at the 33-29 intersection right now. So we wouldn't be looking at that, and Greene County has submitted several projects along the corridor over the past several rounds. We just haven't been able to get anything funded up to this point.
Great, thanks. Terry asks, is a traffic light now being planned for the upcoming 607 Connector Road intersection with 29, or is an R cut still planned?
This is Kylie Cavanis with Kettleson. I can take a first stab at this, but I might need to go back into the study itself and confirm. I believe the original assumption was an R cut. Technically, that study intersection, even though it falls within our study area, isn't one of the 19 study intersections we have. Although the ones adjacent to it are. If I remember correctly, though, from reading the report, I think it's still an R cut. Maybe Chuck, if you recall, otherwise I can dig into that a little bit more.
Yeah, it is an R cut. The U-turn will occur at Heatherston Court. And when we did the study, it was initially, we weren't going to signalize it. With the increased development there at Terrace Green, it's going to trigger that signalization of that intersection. So we will probably be looking at signalizing that portion of that intersection. And it is still going to be an R cut.
Okay. Rebecca asks, where does your accident data come from for intersections? So all of the crashes that were included from 2015 to 2020 are crashes that were recorded by police. So those police crash reports get sent to VDOT and maintained in a database for easy access to pull all of those crashes at once. Second question is it possible to predict how adding public transportation would affect traffic flow during peak hours?
This is Chris. I can take a stab at it. So yes, I mean, basically we can look at different levels of ridership and route choice, right? So if we, both Cat and Jaunt would like to, expand and add routes to serve this corridor. So as we look at, the potential for that and maybe, test some assumed routes, and a mode split, or how many people would that technically or theoretically attract, those are people that you take 10 people out of 10 cars and put 10 people into one bus. And so we can do that math and kind of model from a sensitivity standpoint, how much value, how much bang for the buck, if you will, does that opportunity afford the corridor in terms of how it performs and operates. So.
Thanks. So next one is more of a comment. So looking at many of the feeder roads from the east and west converging at State Route 6441 and Route 29, I'm glad this area will be studied. Broadly speaking, merely making onto and off of Route 29 at this intersection would be a great improvement. In particular, making a long acceleration deceleration lanes for both north and south on Route 29s at this intersection. Okay, thanks for that comment. I'll definitely keep that in consideration. Okay, so Terry asks, bike ped paths along Route 29 would be great, but not at the expense of narrowing or removing lanes like some regions have done with the roads. Are any lanes considered to be removed to provide bike lanes in any of these future scenarios?
This is
I can answer that one.
Okay, I was going to pass it off to you, Chuck, because I know we talked this morning or earlier this afternoon about that.
No, we're looking at something separated from the roadway. We're going to maintain what's on 29 and look at a separated facility, possibly on one side or the other side, to accommodate bikes and pedestrian movements along the corridor. We don't want to have those on the corridor per se, so we're looking at something that's going to be separate.
And this is Kylie Cavanis. I can just add to the volume to capacity ratios that we're looking at does have to eventually do with the capacity of the roadway as a whole. So removing a lane, or I guess what some refer to as reallocation of lanes or road diets, none of that for a major arterial like US 29 is reasonable. And so, and given the high speeds of the traffic as well, it's infeasible to have pedestrians and bikes be directly adjacent without any separation along the facility.
So it looks like we're still getting a few questions on Frays Mill and Burnley Station Road. So I just want to reiterate that no decision has been made yet. So this study, we're taking a holistic look at control forms or improvements at that intersection. So there's not necessarily a U-turn to speak of to date. So we're taking a look at that in the future and happy to have discussions when we come up with some improvements for that intersection. So Pastor Dave has some concerns for his elderly members being able to make quick decisions merging onto 29. The embankment is tall and hinders vision. Is there a plan for taking down some of the embankment and cutting back trees as part of the plan at the corner of Watt and Burnley Station? So I'll say that, yeah, that's certainly something that's on the table, you know, as we've done a field review of the corridor, taking a look at site distances, where we note that site distances are limited and it creates a hazard for people trying to merge or accelerate onto 29, that it'll certainly be a recommendation for the corridor.
Yeah, this intersection is just off the corridor to the east of 29. Watts Passage comes into Burley Station right in front of the church. I'll have to pass this on to see if this could be something that maintenance could look at and to see if we could remove some of these trees. It just depends on whether they're in the right of way or not. That's going to be the key thing along that corridor.
Thanks, Chuck. So Terry mentioned that he was traveling from Burnley Station Road to Hollymead this morning at 8:30 a.m. The light changed and there was no delay in people starting to move. I was the third car and had just entered the intersection when the light changed yellow. 2 more cars followed me through the intersection and several cars remained at the light. With these cars waiting because the light sequencing was too short for the traffic load, wouldn't this increase the level of service for that time frame?
I mean, I could try to answer this one. It depends on the volume of traffic on the side, on the main line. You may only get 2 or 3 cars through on the side street. If the volume on the main line is so great that it's got to carry more traffic volume than the side street. So it depends. And we look at that when we're doing the traffic signal timing plans, and we'll try to adjust that accordingly, but it may not be right every time. So it may require that you sit through the side at the side street for a cycle before you can actually get in. And that's got to do with the sheer volume of traffic on 29.
Hey, Chuck, this is Troy. I can also maybe add something to this. There are different timing plans for the entire corridor. Well, it's a timing plan for the entire corridor. And often when that timing plan changes, which around 8:30, it's probably transitioning into out of the AM peak and into another timing plan. What happens sometimes during that transition period, you get a very short cycle length. It's something that we've seen in other locations, and it's kind of tough to deal with, but we can have our timing engineer take a look at those signals to see if that's what's happening here or not. But that is one thing that we have noticed, is that when you transition from one plan to the next, sometimes you get short cycles, and this happens. It usually lasts 5 or 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe on the most, and then it's back to normal.
Thanks. Okay, so the next few questions are on Burnley Station. Just talking about what priorities we have in terms of preserving minor street movements, as well as what does the entry look like for that movement. And I'll just say that nothing's been determined yet. So, but if something an ARCUT were to come on the table, is the opportunity for that to also be signalized, and that movement would be channelized. But again, we'll be taking a holistic look at other solutions as well outside of the ARCUT. So nothing's been determined just yet. An anonymous attendee has asked, so what are some of the thoughts around the Airport Road intersection? Are there any preliminary thoughts that jump to mind about making improvements there? Obviously, still working through that analysis, but.
This is Kylie Cavanis. I can give just a brief overview of just my own observations from doing the analysis, and maybe Chris or Chuck, others have additional comments. Not necessarily thinking what could be, but looking at the existing conditions out there today. It is the intersection with the highest volume to capacity ratio. It is exceeding the capacity of Route 29 out there today, and capabilities of the signal, and on top of that, being slightly closer to the city of Charlottesville, having some bike ped facilities. I think it's definitely an intersection that we're going to have to take a close look at, because you're also, you're trying to weigh many different things, and one of the things you're trying to weigh is property impacts, or just, to have an additional lane or a turn lane or anything like that would take property from what's out there today. And today, that is one of the most dense intersections along the corridor, just in terms of businesses and properties around it, with buildings close to the property line. So I will say, existing conditions, it operates poor today. It's going to operate poor as there continues to be development and hopefully roadway improvements that we can propose and discuss and share with you all for your opinions would help us come to the best solution for that. But I don't know if Chuck or Troy or anyone have preliminary thoughts as to what are we looking at there.
I'll jump in. This is Chuck. I know traffic engineering was looking at restriping the southbound right turn lane so that you could do 3 through lanes. I'm not sure what the status of that is, and that would ease some of the southbound volume issues with the backups on 29 in that direction, especially in the morning. In the northbound, we currently don't have any improvements planned for widening the road to allow for more vehicle throughput in the northbound direction. So we'll have to look at that in the future as we move forward with this study to see if there's something we can do else at that intersection, or possibly look at extension of that, an additional receiving lane in the northbound direction to accommodate additional throughput through the intersection. I don't know if you want to add anything else, Troy.
No, the big thing, we need to get that striping done. I mean, there are 3 lanes that you could use to go through there now, and we just need to stripe it so it's a little bit of a shift there, so that people know to use that 3rd lane, which should help some. But other than that, that's what we've kind of looked at this point.
Good, thanks. John asks, Pretty Creek Park is a biking paradise. Is there a plan to build bike trails from Charlottesville? So I'll say, as a part of this study, we're certainly looking at adding shared use paths or bike paths along US 29, but I'll open it up to either if the TJPDC or counties have any plans to connect down to Charlottesville itself.
This is Kevin McDermott from Albemarle County again. We are slowly piecing together bike trails that head north from the city all the way up towards Hollymead, including the shared use path along 29 that was built. And we've got extensions of that already. Some of it's already proposed and some other connections that are being planned. And that would essentially get people to the southern end of this study corridor at Airport Road. But this study would look at the extension of those up to Watts Passage and up to Burnley Station. And I think on-road facilities would probably be in order for there, but these are all really long-term plans that we're looking at.
Thanks. So with regards to the 607 connector, Terry asks, did I hear that it was going to be a signalized arc cut? Does this combine both features? So the short answer is yes. So it's the arc cut is what restricts right turn movements out of the minor street to right out only. And if it would be signalized, so that would be a signalized movement. Obviously, it'd be a little bit more easier. You don't have to wait for a gap in traffic. That signal would provide that gap to pull out onto mainline US 29. Mark asks, could the study recount the traffic from the feeders at different times, given the continued growth in housing in the area?
So Andy, this is Chris. I think Mark, you followed up. The counts were done fairly recently, and to the extent that those counts didn't capture, I'll call it rooftops or other development traffic that since that time is probably added. We've added that in so that our baseline condition is as close to right now, if you will, as possible. So I think the answer is I think we've captured that phenomenon as well as, and then when we project out to the future, we're also capturing, yet unseen but planned or approved development that's coming online.
Thanks, Chris. Next question. Why is the number of accidents at Frays Mill Road so high? i.e., what is it about the intersection configuration that makes it so dangerous?
I can take a quick stab at this one and let anyone else join in, but I think a lot of the signalized intersections in general along Route 29 in this study area, we're seeing a high number of rear end crashes. And so I think it has a little bit less to do with the, say, geometry of such an intersection and more to do with you have north and southbound traffic that are going at high speeds and then have to stop at an intersection like Frays Mill or Boulders Road or any of those. So I think the rear end crashes really, or the amount of rear end crashes really explain or go hand in hand with the nature of US 29, which is a high speed major arterial.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Yeah, and the fact that this is the first signal for, I think, since Matthews Mill Road coming in the southbound direction and Austin Drive, if you're going northbound, it's the first signal in a while. So many folks aren't expecting to stop, and it kind of, when you're traveling at a high rate of speed, you may not be able to decelerate in enough time as you come upon the signal. Schultz says, there are so many hills and valleys on US 29 that a bike or walking path would be rarely used. Build a bike path somewhere else. So I think that's something we'll be considering, when we look at geometry of where a bike path could go. recognizing that there will be a whole host of users that may use it along 29, from recreational users to commuters. But that's not outside the realm of possibility for future studies to look at alternative paths for bike trails.
Yeah, and I think that question definitely, or that comment is intuitive. I'd say it's a good observation, because in a more urban area where you would have normally higher pedestrian or say bicycle traffic, those facilities would be utilized. And so given the more rural nature or suburban nature of the area along Route 29, along with the lack of, I'd say, commercial areas that are within close proximity. I mean, you're talking about a 6-mile corridor, a 6-mile bike trail. What will it connect to? What will the destinations be? How will it connect to other modes? I think those are questions that we're going to be diving into and taking a look at when we consider, again, like all of the modes and how they relate to one another along the corridor.
I think we've reached the end of the questions in the Q&A chat. Oh, sorry, something popped up on my screen. Sorry. Came up. So what is the rationale for trying to get an arc cut at Fraze Mill? What would it accomplish? Just reiterate that it's not necessarily the improvement we're recommending just yet. We'll be taking a holistic look. But in general, if an arc cut were to be recommended, by restricting movements to right out only, you reduce the number of conflict points at the intersection, and that main conflict point being left turns and through movements on US 29, which often intersect at a 90-degree angle, which results in a high severity crash, as opposed to, if you have a right out only, it's more likely to have a side swipe crash or rear end crash, which is less severe, although still not desired, but less severe. And it also improves the operation of the signal, because instead of a traditional traffic signal with 6 to 8 phases that have, causes delay as you change from phase to phase as you're waiting to go, it's a 2-phase signal, so it's operates much more efficiently. But I'll again, that's something we'll be considering, but it's not the recommendation just yet. Okay, Megan notes the northbound lane on 29 in the PM is very congested before the light at Boulder Road. She often watches 1 or 2 cars cross 29 from Boulder Road to the southbound lane on 29. Are there plans to improve this area?
That's one of the locations we're looking at as part of this study. That's one section of the road from Camelot through Austin Drive. That's one of the highest priorities for this study for recommended improvements. Boulder Road, especially on the east side, you've got the Ravenna Station, and that's mainly, they get out at a certain time of day. So they have a bulk of traffic that comes out at one time, and then they basically don't have a lot after that. So we'll have to look at that when we're looking at the solutions for that location to see if what we can do to make that function better, or what alternatives we could use to improve that situation.
And Andy, this is Kylie. I can also add, there is a question that was sent to us in the chat, similar area, even though it wasn't in the Q&A, that I recall reading, asking about the centers of gravity where people work, and that the on the east side there of Boulders Road, the DIA and GIC have a lot of people living south and north on the study area. And that question is, how much focus will there be on developing alternative paths, such as bike paths to those centers of gravity? And I think that just goes hand in hand with the question at boulders is we'll be taking, again, a holistic look, all modes. And definitely if there are centers, like generators, say traffic generators, that could be accessing that location in another way other than a single-use occupancy vehicle, then that's definitely something to encourage as well. So again, taking a look at those additional alternative, bike trail, shared use paths, transit options that would also help lessen that load of the minor street traffic, resulting in queuing and delays at Boulders Road.
Thanks. We have a few questions with regards to red light running and speeding along the corridor. I think folks are noting that the straight line nature of the corridor in certain sections contributes to some of the speeding and red light running. Yeah, certainly the geometry of the roadway tends to lend itself towards that. So, not necessarily looking at hard traffic calming measures, but ways to help discourage speeding along the corridor will certainly be things that are in consideration. I don't know if anyone else has any other comments on those.
I know the question came up about possibly adding more flashing lights. Troy might be able to chime in on this. We've used these in other locations, and they provide some effectiveness for a short amount of time, but long-term, that's not a preferred solution because it doesn't really stop the problem. Because people get used to that and they don't necessarily pay attention to it as much as they do when you first put them up. So in the short term, it may help the situation and reduce the number of crashes, but in long term, it generally doesn't have as much effect.
Yeah, I agree completely with what Chuck said. The cab flashers that were installed at Boulders serve a little bit different purpose. There was a problem, particularly going northbound on 29, where you have the crest of that hill, where when there were cars queued up from the stoplight, you couldn't see the back of the queue. So there was no way for a vehicle approaching the crest of the hill to know if there was a car right on the other side of it or not. So those cab flashers were installed. You'll probably notice they do not flash all the time. They just are tied in with the controller of the signal to give drivers on 29 warning that, hey, you better slow down because there may be something on the other side of the hill. And that was what the intent of that was. They've worked pretty well. It's a little bit different situation at Frey and Burnley because you can see for a long ways as you approach that signal. Most of that is inattention and speed is what we see with those crashes.
Okay, thank you both. John asks, has there been a study to look at other options to reduce rear-end collisions at this intersection? I think this is with regards to Frey's Mill. It seems that this is a better solution to meet goals. I'll just add that I think this is that study. So we'll be taking a holistic look at that intersection and other improvements to see what can be done to reduce crashes as well as improve the operations. I'm not seeing other new questions come in.
Yeah, Andy, I see one, is there an attendee with their hand up? I don't know if Lucinda, you can get them so that they could speak. Let me
I
see.
think I can provide them allow to talk.
Okay,
Yeah.
there we go.
Robert, you should be able to unmute yourself and talk now. Mike, can you hear us? He's still
Yeah,
unmuted.
if hit *6 on your phone, try that.
Mike Traber, you should be able to unmute yourself and talk now.
In the meantime, we do have a couple of other questions. Well, I guess more or less comments. Oh, it looks like he might have left.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he dropped off. Darn.
Looks like there's some, yeah, comments sort of suggesting or saying that speed cameras have been used in Montgomery County, Maryland, very effective for red light runners. Yeah, and then again, another comment about speed cameras being used in DC and Northern Virginia. Chuck or Troy, do you have any thoughts on those? This comment says they might not reduce the speed, but could generate revenue for the road improvements in the area.
The only thing I can say is I don't know about speed cameras, but I know we have, I mean, we don't use them for ticketing, but I mean, the police can use them as to advise the motorists how fast they're going as more of a warning. So then a revenue generator. We do have red light running cameras, but that's something that the county has to initiate. And we did have them at Rio Road before it was improved. But I'm not aware of other locations that we have them in the district. But that's something that you have to work through the locality to initiate, something along those lines.
And I can also put another plug in at this point for the for the survey. We do ask in the survey through MetroQuest your priorities based on transportation problems and opportunities. Some of those questions we ask about related to vehicular traffic is, would investments in law enforcement, like speed enforcement versus roadway design versus reduced turning conflicts, that kind of stuff. All of those questions are in the survey. And so if you could provide your feedback in there as well, that would be very beneficial, very helpful to us to get your input and to have it all in one place when we compile it all at the end here. All right, and then it looks like there's one more raised hand. John, I think you've been unmuted. John Haas.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, so you kind of had my question being avoided here. If the light disappears at Burnley Station and I'm forced to take a right, where can I next pull a U-turn to turn my trailer?
Is this in reference to the
Horse Park, the one I've asked several questions.
in regards to Fraze Mill, the Burnley Station Road?
Yeah, I think of it as the intersection of Burnley Station. Yes, Fraze Mill, Burnley Station, right?
Okay. Yeah, Chuck, do you want to take that? Or if he is not there, I can also, I mean, this study is not looking necessarily at the intersection of or the R cut, I guess what was proposed as the R cut back in what, 2018 when
I
that
don't-
study was done?
What is an R cut?
It's a restricted crossing U-turn. Basically, it's taking one intersection and splitting it up, the movements up, so that you're not having all of the conflict points occurring at one intersection. So if you want to make that left-hand turn coming out of Burley Station, or go from to go southbound onto 29, you'd have to make the right-hand turn at a signalized intersection. So you could wait till the signal turned red, and then you can make the right-hand turn. And then a U-turn bay would be created just to the north within like 1,000 feet. And then at that point, you could make the U-turn to go southbound. These would all be signalized intersections, and they would be built to accommodate large vehicles, tractor trailers, trucks with trailers, so that you can make that maneuver at a signalized intersection. It wasn't eliminating the signal. It was moving the conflict points of an intersection away from each other so that they can work more efficiently and reduce the safety of one intersection that it has right now. And that's what it does.
Right, and a tractor trailer would be adequate. If they could turn, I could turn.
Yeah,
But
it would accommodate a tractor trailer.
Where north would that be?
It would be probably before you get to the Albemarle County sign.
Gotcha.
In that area somewhere. It's before you get to the county line.
And
Excellent.
I can provide.
I so much wish you would make that well known, because if users of the park like myself with trailers, you shut down the park if we don't know we can turn around to get back to town.
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, it would have one of those for both ends. So if you come out Frays Mill and you want to go north into Greene County, you would make the right, go down less than a quarter mile, and then make a U-turn at a signalized intersection. That would be specifically for that U-turn, and it would be designed to accommodate the larger vehicles.
Oh, that's great. That's a better solution.
And that's what we had proposed, and that was submitted for Smart Scale. We are going to reevaluate that to see if that's still a viable solution for that location. So as part of this study, we're going to do that. So we're not removing anything. We're not planning to remove anything right now. And it would still have to go through a process and get locality support, because they're the ones who are submitting the applications for funding any of these improvements if they are recommended for improvements in the future.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Mike Traber, I think we're gonna try again, see if you're able to.
How's that working?
Yes, that works.
All right. I love it when this comes together. Yeah, thanks for hosting this tonight. I have just a quick question. Up in Greene, the Board of Supervisors just approved a large project we have coming called the Ruckersville Town Center, which will be just north of the Terrace Green Apartments, south of Sheets, right there by Cedar Grove Road by Food Line. And one of the questions that we've been discussing in the Ruckersville Advisory Committee is how do we get corridors that will allow that center of gravity over on that, I guess it's on the northbound side, to be able to have access to like the Food Line and stuff that's across a very busy intersection to get across 29. So you're going to have businesses and potential residencies and apartments over on that side. The big issue has always been, how do we get the people to be able to walk from that area over to the other center of gravity, which is the Food Line? How much I haven't heard a lot about that pedestrian crossover. You talked a little bit in the beginning about crossovers, but what are you guys thinking about for improvements in that lot?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can touch on it briefly and see if anyone else wants to add to what I have to say. But again, I think the multimodal focus that we're having on this study will, it's a great question, because that's sort of the same questions we have. It's like, okay, we have multiple access points and we have people getting from here to there, but it's across, you know, a 4-lane median divided highway. How do you do such a thing? And so I think pedestrian crossings, bike crossings, pedestrian crossings, crossings in general are definitely something that you see none of along the corridor today. And where there is pedestrian activity, I mean, not to also focusing on the fatalities that we've seen up in between Deerfield Drive and up in Greene County, up between there and I guess Heatherton Drive, I think again poses this need for pedestrian crossings when there's a commercial area in such close proximity to a commercial or workplace or any other access point that would draw people out of their homes within, you know, the mile of where they're heading. And so I think that area is definitely that heavy pedestrian presence that we want to address in this study.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's going to be one of the high priority areas for us as we begin to develop more of that town center feel. And trying to make that mobility across that area is going to be really important for us in Ruckersville, because 29 is essentially a barrier to pedestrian traffic at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's pretty much a barrier throughout the corridor, even down in the Albemarle County as you get close to Charlottesville, to the point where with the project we just got funded, we're actually adding a pedestrian overpass just north of the hydraulic 29 intersection to get pedestrians from one side to the other side, because currently there's not any crossings there. We are actually including a crossing at hydraulic and 29 also at grade. So hopefully we can look at opportunities for adding those along the corridor as we do our review and are coming up with recommendations. I mean, the downside to it is if you're allowing pedestrians to cross the road, you're having to actually stop the traffic for longer periods of time. So we have to weigh that time to see which is the most critical. And it could be that we have to look at providing those pedestrian overpasses more along the corridor to allow those people to cross the corridor, because it is such a highly traveled corridor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'd just like to make the point, the area Mike's talking about is the area where the 3 fatalities occurred. And it will become more built up, and there'll be more pedestrian needs.
Yeah, that's good to note. Thanks, Jim. That's I think that was an area that we had seen just strictly looking at the raw crash data as a concern. You know, no pedestrian activity, crashes of any sort regarding pedestrians or related to pedestrians along the corridor, except for in that area. And yeah, you have 55+ mile per hour vehicles and pedestrians, and it just makes for a very dangerous intersection or conflict when any would occur. So yeah, I think that area will definitely focus on for pedestrian accessibility and crossing.
Did have one more question come in through the Q&A function. So someone's asking, if an arc cut is put at Fraze Mill Burning Station, wouldn't that result in southbound merge lanes into high-speed traffic? And how is this safer for commuters, trailers, senior citizen, first responders? So that's a great question. I think I'll start off just by saying that if an arc cut were to go in, it's likely that it would still be signalized. So movements coming from Fraze Mill or Burnley Station would have a green signal, so that coming out protected, they wouldn't have to merge. So we wouldn't necessarily be adding a merge lane onto US 29, as well as that U-turn location would also be signalized in most likely case.
Yeah, and Andy, this is Chris. I might just add, but part of the reasons our cuts are so successful, Chuck pointed out several of them, the reduction of conflict points. But if you compare their operations, especially in this volume regime, a heavier volume, higher volume intersection like Fraze Mill 29, when you're actually able to synchronize the lights to a certain extent, and the net delay that the side street traffic would experience at a traditional traffic signal is actually reduced. The net time you wait to go where you're going, even if you wanted to turn left and you have to turn right and make a U-turn, is oftentimes going to actually be less time than you would have waited at a traditional traffic signal. So the safety improvement coupled with reduced delays and that ability to synchronize the traffic flows, so that once you get the green, you kind of get the green through the system, and you're not stopping at each one of these points. It becomes a much more efficient and safe traffic control form to consider for intersections like this. But again, I think we've all said it. That isn't we're not here to suggest that that's the solution. I imagine that intersection form will be one of the ones in the mix that we look at to see how it performs. But, that was identified based on, traffic volumes and conditions that were 4 or 5 years ago. Things are different, and, we're looking at a different horizon year than those things looked at. And so there's definitely, from our perspective, it's a clean slate, and, we're not leaning, but, happy to talk about our cuts all the time.
And the attendee also noted that traffic signals needed for the intersection where the hotel is just inside the Greene County line. And it's very dangerous.
Yeah, and we do have that intersection. If I am looking or calling the right one, I think it's the Holiday Inn. That's just within Greene County. We have it listed as a study intersection just north of Lakes Attorney Drive. So that is one that we will be looking at as well.
Thanks. I think we have another hand raised. I see Terry's hand's raised.
I think, Terry, you can unmute now. There we go.
Oh, it looked like it had.
Oh, it did for a second.
There you go.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, there we go.
Okay, on an R cut, whenever everybody's thinking, and I was thinking, I want to make sure I'm thinking correctly. On the northbound, like if you put one at Fraze Mill, northbound traffic, the light that turns there, because that is a minimal use, northbound traffic in the morning would be reduced. So if you're trying to go down to Charlottesville, then that light wouldn't necessarily be sequenced the same as the one going Fraze Mill turning right. That way because you got less traffic you're turning into, and then you go up, hit your U-turn light, and then come back down. And then you're merging in at higher speed in the lane that you got. So you're merging in traffic in the same direction to take care of the direct impact traffic accidents, correct?
Yeah, Terry, that's more or less correct. Basically, think of the R cut as a single intersection broken into 3, but in any one direction along 29, you only experience 2 traffic signals. So if you were traveling northbound towards Fraze Mill, you would approach, actually the first thing you'd come to is a potential signal that's for the U-turn to go north, right? So the people that had to make a right out of Fraze Mill to come down and make a U-turn to go north on 29. So if you were traveling northbound on 29, there's a signal there that facilitates that U-turn movement. And then there's a signal that controls the actual Frays Mill, Burnley Station Road intersection. Once you're past that, it's free sailing northbound. Same
Okay, so
thing,
it's
but
essentially a
flip.
double R cut. You're blocking the complete turn across. So the median would extend across what currently is the Frays Mill intersection. And then you would have an R cut on both ends to handle the traffic.
Yeah, so a restricted, so the crossing, the main street lefts can still occur. So if you're traveling south and you want to turn onto Burnley Station, you're going to make that left turn right at Burnley Station. It's only the side street movements that do not allow for crossing US 29 or making a left onto US 29.
Yes. Okay.
We're probably saying the same thing. This is why, you know, Terry, you can go look. I think if you even went to the Smart Scale web page and looked, that project, there's a concept drawing of
Hey, I can pull it up.
Oh, do you want to just pull it up on your screen, Chuck? Because I
Yeah,
think a
I'm
picture's worth 1,000 words here.
I'm trying to find it right now. So
okay.
I think I visualized what you're saying, and it took me a while to realize it, but you're right. A picture would be worth 1,000 words here.
Yeah, and I think too what I think I caught you saying, Terry, is that basically because the signals are you sort of have two signals, two signals that you go through, but you have but you have a different signal that's going to be coordinated differently in the southbound direction than say you would in the northbound direction. So they wouldn't necessarily be forced to stop at the same time to allow those lefts to happen. So if there's a ton more, let's say northbound lefts that we need to stop southbound traffic for, that wouldn't necessarily impact what's happening on the northbound.
Correct. AM and PM traffic would be changed. You know, AM northbound doesn't have much. PM southbound doesn't have much. So it allows you to change that sequencing up to where you can accommodate more traffic in a faster period of time.
that's correct. Can you see this sketch now?
Yes, I'm looking at it.
Okay, well, you can see you got Frays Mill on the north side and Burley Station on the south side. This was the concept sketch for this improvement that was submitted by the TJPDC for the last round of Smart Scale. Currently, we're going to relook at this to see if what options work here. So we don't really, but this is what we had come up with before. So you can see how you have 3 signalized intersections and how the movements are split up to where you make the right-hand turn off Burley Station, you go north, make the left-hand turn at the U-turn bay, and it's got a loom to accommodate the larger vehicles, and then you just can proceed southbound. There's not really a merge or anything because you're stopping the traffic that's southbound when you're making that U-turn movement. So you don't have to merge into high-speed traffic.
Yeah, except for that one light runner.
Well, I mean, you're going to have that regardless. You have that at the intersection now, and you do have crashes as a result of some of those. That's I don't know how we can necessarily deal with behavior. There's only so much we can do.
Yeah, Chuck, I will say
to do what's best for operations and safety.
Right.
Yeah, to that point though, Terry, and yeah, thanks, Chuck. Another, it's a small advantage to that point specifically is when you are the person making the U-turn, it's hard to see even on the screen, I know, but you've already made almost 90 degrees of that 180 degree turn when you're about to turn onto mainline 29 again. It's a lot easier as a driver making that maneuver to see or anticipate somebody approaching the signal that's not paying attention or looks like they're going to run a red light versus when you're on the side street at the signal today on Burnley Station and making a left to go south on 29, driving all the way across the median, you're not, you can't really see or discern somebody traveling southbound at a high rate of speed nearly as well. So it actually improves the visual, you know, the view angle for the driver to actually potentially even, you know, avoid that type of situation, even when somebody's not behaving as they should, or, you know, following the law or paying attention.
Yeah, your visibility is definitely increased here because you're looking straight at the oncoming traffic versus trying to turn your head left and look at the traffic coming from the other side.
Exactly.
And especially on that intersection, because it is elevated on both sides of Burnley Station. So it's really a blind corner. Thank you.
All right, Andy, it looks like we've reached the end of the question stream here.
I believe so.
All
And
right.
it also looks like our participants are dropping as well, just from the number that we had prior to. It's probably a good stopping point.
Yeah.
Chris, do you want to, well, I can share my screen again, but I was just going to say, remind folks.
Yeah.
To
yeah, or maybe
survey.
So for those, yes, yeah, okay. So I'll attempt to wrap this up. So again, for those of you still with us, appreciate you investing some time this evening to chat with us about this study, about what we've seen and learned so far. It's certainly been helpful, and we certainly appreciate the comments and the discussion this evening. Yeah, Kylie's just dropping in the link to the online survey, and maybe we can also drop back in the project website that you can find information about the project. Yeah, please do take some time to take that survey. It won't take too long, but it's really valuable to get your feedback and continue this dialogue. We really value that feedback, and it really helps kind of shape and inform how we progress through the study. It keeps us connected to, you know, the community and the goals and objectives of the study, and how those two things really sync up with one another. So again, thank you all so much for taking some time this evening. And I think with that, Chuck, Lucinda, we can sign off.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody participation, and both from the consultant staff and the public. So I appreciate everybody attending and providing some good feedback. So hopefully we'll get some good results moving forward and come up with some concepts and some alternatives that will address everybody's concerns.
I'm ending the meeting now. Goodbye, everybody.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.